In this video, we're going to look at resistance to change and also look at some other related topics. This video is linked to several others in the series, in this particular module and in other modules. So it's important that you try to see those other videos as well and make your own notes and do some research in the area. So to start, there is what we call overt and covert resistance. Overt is in the open, obvious resistance, and covert resistance is behind the scenes, shadowy sort of resistance, not talked about, but it's there and it's real, but it's secretive almost. So there are two types. One is the outward one, where it's obvious that people resist the change, and the other type is where they keep it inside, that they're not happy, they don't like what's been proposed, and they're going to resist it in some way, but it's not very obvious how. Also have the resistors consciously or unconsciously undermined the change, because sometimes resistors, the people who resist the change, they may have consciously or unconsciously undermined it. Now that means they may have stopped the change, or they may resist the change, and they might do this consciously, they set out to do it, or simply they do it unconsciously. They do it by their actions, by not supporting the change, by not being wholeheartedly behind it. So the change does not go through. So sometimes resistors can, as I said, consciously make it obvious that they resist the change and do everything in their power to stop the change. Or alternatively, they may subconsciously or unconsciously oppose the change, in the sense that it's inside them, they're not wholly committed, they resist the change. These two extremes allow managers to categorize resistance and allow a manager to choose a course of action effectively. So the fact that we can identify different types of resistance to change or approaches to change means the management can try to categorize what's likely to happen and develop policies to deal with it. So here we've got overt change, which is overt resistance, I should say, to change, which is obvious, open, declared resistance to change. People are saying out loud they do not want to change, and they are overtly against it. They are openly against it. Covert resistance is more deep-seated. It's not spoken about. It's resistance which is planned and secretively spoken about, and perhaps groups of people may plan to resist the change, and it's not obvious who's supporting the change or who's against it. It's more a shadowy world, the covert resistance. And also we have the resistors which are consciously undermining the change, openly doing their best and trying hard to resist the change, and the unconscious ones who are resisting the change but not putting a lot of effort into it, just nonetheless not supporting it, and thereby reducing the possibility of the change. So we have different extremes here, and we can put these into a matrix to have a look at the types of person involved. So we'd have the overt and covert, like we just talked about, and the conscious and the unconscious. Now let's just look at this for a moment. Let's just let's put the cursor onto the screen. Okay, now here we've got conscious resistance and overt. Well, overt is open, and conscious, it's planned and open. So the type of person here we're looking for is a protester. Protesters are overt. We know who they are. They're making it obvious that they resist the change, and they're conscious. They're doing it consciously. Now they might be consciously trying to resist the change, but doing it covertly. Now, in which case they're a saboteur. They're trying to damage the whole process of change, but they're trying to do it secretively and with stealth. They're not making it obvious that they're resisting it, but they're becoming saboteurs. And then we've got the unconscious and the overt. Unconscious means they're not really trying to oppose the change, but they're open about it. They're open, but they're not really articulate about why they're resisting the change, and they're like zombies. They're just against it. They're unconsciously against it. They're not, as I said, very open about it, but they're overt. You can spot who they are. They're zombies. And then we've got the covert, the people who are planning against the change, and they're also unconscious. These are the survivors. So we have different classifications, and these were brought up, and the text mentioned at the bottom of the page is the source of reference. Now, resistance to change can either be covert or overt. Covert, so that lack of support for change is either concealed or undefined. It's covert. It's concealed resistance. It's not very clear who's resisting it, or what the basis of the resistance is, or the nature of the resistance. It's covert. It's there, but it's like secretively there. Covert resistors are often ambitious employees who undermine projects in favor of their own interests. So sometimes covert resistance can be just planting doubts in the mind of the person proposing the change, planting doubts, upsetting meetings, trying to highlight problems with the change. They're really sabotaging the whole process. It's covert, and they are consciously doing it, perhaps. And if they are consciously doing it, then they're sabotaging it. They're saboteurs. They're consciously sabotaging the possibility of change. They're planting doubts, and they're upsetting the meetings and upsetting the plans, and slowing the whole process down, and getting it a bad reputation, and highlighting all the bad parts of it. So sometimes employees do that because they want to promote their own ideas or promote themselves, or their ambitions lie in the resistance to some change. It's often not detected until it's too late. Sometimes after some proposed change has failed or not been implemented, the reasons why it wasn't implemented come to the surface. They come to the surface because one person may have altered the timings of the meetings, or changed some aspect of the information associated with the change. It might be quite deliberate sabotage, in which case it's not just unethical, it might even be illegal. So, but it could be that it's, if it's not that serious, certainly unethical. It's not right to simply resist the change using these tactics. The change should be resisted openly and frankly, and through criticism they may even improve the proposal. But going around the back and just resisting the change, and trying to build up support for people who are against it, and trying to frighten people that the change will damage them in some way, and putting around rumours, and that's the type of covert activity that we're talking about here. Overt resistance, so that those who resist change express their opinions openly and offer their reasons for disagreement. Now, this actually could be a good thing. This could improve the proposals. It could lead to open discussions and debates about the advantages and disadvantages, and the fact that people are resisting the change may be a good thing, because it'll strengthen the proposal if it does go through. Their criticisms will have to be built in and answered. So this type of overt criticism could be a good thing. Because of overt resistance leads to debate and sometimes conflict, it means that this is far easier to manage than covert resistance. Covert resistance is difficult to manage because it's difficult to know who's doing it and what's been said, and it's just creating a bad atmosphere, covert. But overt resistance is in the open. And as I said, there could be actually a positive side to it. It may strengthen the arguments and the debate and clarify issues, and people don't want it. They don't want to change, but in so doing, they're arguing openly, and that's possibly a very good thing, because the people who are arguing for the change will have to argue even harder and bring in more evidence and bring in more points in favour of the change. So there's greater understanding all round as a consequence of this type of resistance. Managers, as I say, can hear and see their adversaries in cases of overt resistance, but covert resistors are far harder to detect. Covert resistors are difficult to find. Who's resisting it, and what's been said behind closed doors, and what's been planned, and who's in it, and what will they do? And there's much more fear and anxiety about covert, and it's not a very nice atmosphere working in a place where there's a lot of rumours and perhaps false rumours circulating about particular developments. Overt, people know. It's obvious who's in favour and who's against. Overt, so that those who resist the change express their opinions openly and offer their reasons for disagreement. So it's open. Managers can deal with it, more effectively, as I said. So managers are happier because the overt criticisms are in the open, and they can talk about it and debate it, and they can see who's opposed to it. And it's difficult, as I said earlier, to deal with covert. So those are the issues against, the use of covert and overt resistance. Two types. Now, unconscious and conscious. Well, when resistance is unconsciously motivated, employees do not actually realize that their actions are undermining the change process. Undermining the change process means that they are not committed to it, but they're not quite sure why they're not committed to it. It's unconscious. They have a feeling. They're maybe just their actions. They're not fully committed. They're unsure about it, and so they're not fully behind the proposals. It's an unconscious resistance. They need to be convinced. They need to be spoken to more. Their actions might be based on wrongful information, poor training, or it might be deeply ingrained habits. People work in an institution for a long time, work in a company for a long time. They have certain routines. The change might be proposing to change those routines, and people are unconsciously unhappy, and they're opposing the change. They're not committed to it. They're not participating. So there may be resistance because of ingrained habits, or it could be wrongful information. Perhaps they misunderstood what was being proposed. If it's very complex, it might be difficult to understand, or they may not have the skills, or may not be trained, so that they don't understand the consequences, and they may be fearful for their positions. So they might be just unconsciously against the proposal. Unconscious resistance or resistant provides management with difficulty because the resistors believe themselves to be entirely innocent of resistance. If they're unconsciously opposing it, as far as they're concerned, they're not conscious of it, so they don't actively oppose it. They're just not committed. So management find it difficult because they're not in the open. And they're not in the open because they themselves don't think they're resisting it. They themselves think they're going along with it, but in fact they're not enthusiastic, they're not supporting it, they're not pushing through the change. Conscious resistance is also a great challenge. These resistors adopt their position after considering the change. So these are conscious resistors. These ones have thought about it. They know what the change is, they know what the proposals are, and they're looking to resist the change. They may be misinformed or even self-serving, but their opinions must be heard. It's important that accurate information is passed out, and these people may be just misinformed. They might need to be put back on the tracks. They might need to be briefed properly as to what the change involves. But they're consciously opposing it. They know what they're doing. They're against it, but the reasons why they're against it may be complex, as I'm suggesting. If they are not, then their resistance only grows. If they're not properly informed, the resistance will grow. The mind will exaggerate the problem. They will see the problem. If it's not dealt with, if the information is not put right, if they're not briefed properly, then they will exaggerate the thing. They will imagine all sorts of outcomes that can happen. So the four extremes of resistance can be expressed as a double matrix, as I said. This matrix has four quadrants, which categorizes the four elements of behavior, and it's the one we looked at right at the start of this session. Each quadrant identifies different kinds of resistance: protester, saboteur, zombie, and survivor. Now, with the first one, let's just look at that, the covert unconscious. Now, the covert unconscious is the survivor. These are resistors who don't realize that they are undermining the change. They're undermining the change in their behavior. They don't even realize they're doing it. It just they're covert. They're not in the public. They're not making it obvious what they believe or what they think. And they themselves are not really that conscious of it. Their actions are they're either indifferent or they're against it, but they're not highly motivated. They don't realize, in fact, that they're undermining the change. They just carry on doing what they're doing, and they're not participating. They're not working towards the change. They don't know that they are failing to meet targets and don't understand the implications of this. They see the new targets that have been set after the change has been implemented. They're not working to those targets. They're working to the old targets. In fact, they're working in the old way of working. They haven't changed. They know what's required of them, but somehow they fall back into the old way of doing it, and that's the way they worked. So they're resisting to change by their behavior. They carry on doing their job in the way that they think is correct. And when their failure is realized, then they are surprised and disappointed. So they carry on doing it the way they were, and they're working to old practices. And when this is pointed out to them, that the system has changed, it's a new system, new requirements, they're surprised, they're amazed. It's as if they hadn't thought about this before. Nobody told them. So they're quite disappointed to have failed in their job, but it was unconscious. It wasn't really their fault. They just didn't think about it. And it was covert. They didn't talk about it. It wasn't open. The result is likely to be that they feel that they have been doing a good job, and they feel discouraged by the wasted effort. And that is often the case. These people, the survivors, they feel like they've been doing a good job. They've been working hard and diligently and accurately, but they've been working to the old system. They've been working in ways which were in the past, that have now changed. And of course, when it's pointed out to them, they're discouraged, they're annoyed, they feel very upset because their efforts It's been to nothing. In fact, their work might be worthless because it no longer contributes towards the overall system or towards what was required. There are lots of stories in computing about when computers were first introduced into offices. People would they had a resistance to the computers. They didn't fight the computer, didn't sabotage the computer or break it or anything. They tried their best and they looked at it, but they didn't trust it. So they would work out all the figures by hand. A spreadsheet could have done it really efficiently, but they were working it out by hand. And eventually, when it was pointed out that if you typed it into the spreadsheet, it would do it far faster and more accurately and so on, then they felt that their efforts, they were trying to do the best. They were not malicious. They were trying to do their best, and they felt disappointed. There are many stories in the computing world about the early days of computerization in offices. The saboteur. Well, these resistors undermine the change while pretending to support it. These are covert. They're pretending to support it. They're not showing their feelings. They're internal. They're not obvious what they feel. But they are conscious that they don't want it. They are quite deliberate. They do not want this change, but they're not showing it. It's not obvious. By looking at them or looking at their behavior, there's no way of telling. But they themselves, they're conscious and they know they do not want this change. They believe that by verbally supporting the change and then doing nothing, that the change will miss them. Often people hope that by supporting the change openly and saying yes, 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 but not doing anything to implement the change or to bring about the change themselves, that somehow the change will either go away, it won't be implemented, or somehow it will be implemented, but they themselves will be left so that they can carry on what they were doing before. That's their belief. The change will happen, but they will be left alone. They will be left with the old system and be able to carry on their life as normal, as the way they see it. It may also be the case that these employees sabotage the change for their own gain. Sometimes people look at the proposed change and they think if the change fails, then their particular part of the work might be promoted and become more important, or that will be more valued. So what they need to do is to not say they're against the change, because that would look bad, but they are consciously against it. So they don't want anyone to think they're against it, but they actually are against it. So they're covert and conscious. So what they need to do now is sabotage it, make sure it doesn't go through. Do something to upset it, get it a bad reputation and get bad results, and in a sense engineer a failure of the proposed change, so that when the change fails, they will be promoted and being seen as the saviors. So sometimes people oppose it for that reason. Now that's highly likely when within environments of high competition. So when there's a lot of competition in the environment, employees are fighting for recognition. And when I say competition here, I mean competition within companies for positions, for careers, for particular jobs. Many people want promotion and so on. Then you'll get planning of this nature. You'll have covert. People are saying they're for something. In fact, they're not. They're consciously against it. They're going to try and sabotage it. And when they sabotage it, they hope to get promotion and to be seen to be more valuable than their colleagues. So they will be promoted above their colleagues. And that might be one of the reasons why there is this type of resistance to change. The protester. Well, these resistors believe that their refusal to change will bring about positive results for the company. So these are overt and conscious. These people come out in the open. These people speak their minds openly. Everyone knows what they believe. They're not hiding anything. And they're very conscious. They know exactly they're against it, and that's it. So these resistors believe that their refusal to change will bring about positive results for the company. They believe by resisting the change, they're helping the company. They've got the company's interest at heart. The change is bad. And they're arguing for this openly. Everyone knows what they believe and why they believe it. These employees do have a positive side, and they serve to protect the company tradition and discourage rash and sudden decisions. So they've actually got quite a positive side. There's something good about these people, because sometimes change can go through too fast and perhaps not have been thought about or reflected upon sufficiently. And when it's implemented, it can be a disaster. It could not lead to the efficiencies that were anticipated. So by having protesters, people who are arguing against it, it slows everything down. It means instead of going through in one meeting, they have to have several meetings, and people have to think while they're away from the meeting, and there's a process of reflection and thinking, and if it does go through in the end, it's got a higher probability of success because it's been thought about more. It's been debated. All the downsides have been looked at, or as many as that can be figured out have been looked at. And that's a good thing. These are the easiest resistors to manage, as they are open and it's possible to discuss the problems clearly and rational. So they are rational about their arguments. So it's possible to deal with them rationally. It's possible to sit them down and talk to them and debate with them and try to prove that they're wrong, and they try to prove that the proposer of the change is wrong, and so there is a debate, and it's open. In fact, this is a good thing. It exposes weaknesses and makes planning more effective, because there's nothing rushed, and also there is nothing left debated. It sort of reduces risk. That's probably a good way of putting it. It reduces risk. This type of resistance is possibly a good thing. The zombie, well, this is overt opposition to something. They're open about their opposition to it, but it's unconscious. They're like the extreme case of the survivor. They are so accustomed to acting in a particular way that they are unable to change. So they make it obvious that they oppose the change, but they're unconscious. They're not. They can't think about it because they're so accustomed to doing something the way it is. They've worked for the company for so long. It's always been done this way. Why change it? They might be looking at things like their retirement, and they don't want to learn two new techniques at this stage in their lives. That might be an issue. But more than likely the case, they genuinely believe that what they're doing is the most efficient way. It's the way they've always done it. So why change? They may agree to what they are told, but they have neither the will nor the ability to create change. So even though it's been explained to them that the change is a good idea and it's got the following advantages, it's been clearly explained, and even though they sit there saying, yes, I understand, and I can understand the benefits, and that's a good idea, they go away and they still won't do it. They'll still revert back to what they were doing. Either they don't have the will to make the change, or they don't have the ability to create the change. They just can't bring themselves to implement the change. They understand it, but they just can't do it. They oppose it. It's often common in highly stable environments that are suddenly required to change. For example, in the privatization of the rail industry in the UK, there were people who had worked for the rail industry and worked well for the rail industry. Honestly and openly had worked well for the rail industry for many years, doing a good job. When the changes came in and there were new working practices, they resisted it because they couldn't bring themselves to do things differently. They may have understood the logic for the change, they may have understood the benefits of the change, but they just can't do it. It's always been done in a certain way. That was their whole working life, so they can't bring themselves to change. So we have our 4 types: protester, saboteur, survivor, and zombie. And now we can classify the people who resist change according to this particular categorization. Now, the culture of the organization. Well, the culture of the organization is also suggested to be an important part in the resistance to change. Sheen states that organizational culture consists of 3 levels. So there are 3 parts to organizational culture. On the surface, there are overt behaviors and other physical manifestations. So one level of looking at the culture of an organization, and particularly the culture in terms of the resistance to changes, there's a superficial level, a level which is pretty obvious. It's overt behaviors. It's what people do. It's what people say. It's the way that people act that can be observed. They're not hiding this. This is overt behavior. And it's possible to look at the implications of their behavior and observe them. So there's nothing hidden here. And below this is a sense of what ought to be. These are the values. And sometimes people carry these inside. They believe this is what ought to happen. This is what we're actually doing, but this is what ought to happen. They themselves have the seeds for change almost built into them. They want to see something happen. This is what ought to be done. This is what they believe, but it's under the surface. And at the very deepest level are those things that are taken for granted as correct ways of coping with the environment. If you like, the basic assumptions. So at the very deepest level, these are the things that are taken for granted as correct ways of coping with the environment. So people understand that this is the right way to do it. So there are 3 different levels of organizational culture. The one that we see, then there's the one that people are carrying around which they believe is the ought level, which what should be done. And then at the very deepest level, there is an understanding of the correct way to cope with the environment. Culture is built up over years of trying, learning, and adapting behaviors that eventually lead to a joint and workforce solution of environmental, organizational, and individual forces. Now, what that means is that the culture is built up over years. People who work in the same company for many years will get to know each other. They'll get to know the working practices. They'll get to know almost the machines and the capacity of the machines and the speed at which they work and the routines of the business. There's a culture within the business, and they will see the product in a certain way, and they'll see the management in a certain way, and they'll relate to each other in certain ways. It's all established because people have worked like that for many years. And in fact, employees who join the company from the outside, when they first join the company, may be a little shocked or a little upset because they feel on the outside of this culture. They don't know it exactly. So the culture should be welcoming to them, which it often is. But the culture is the culture. This is the way it's done. And people have built this up over the years of trying and learning and adapting behaviors. They know each other. They know the routines. They know the machinery. They know the layout. They know where things are. And this eventually leads to a joint and workable solution for environmental, organizational, and individual forces. This is what the company is. This is the latent knowledge of the business. This is what the knowledge of the business enables it to continue. People know where the tools are, they know where the raw materials are, they know what the machines are capable of, they know how to fix the machines and keep them running, and how to deal with each other. And it's a community, it's a culture. And this is the if you like, the knowledge of the business. It's latent, it's not obvious. Looking at it, it's not observable, but it's there. Over time, it's reinforced through the formal and informal employment and promotion of people who buy into the culture. So the culture will select people who are suitable, that fit in. And as more and more people fit in, the culture is bolstered up, the culture becomes stronger. So it's maintaining itself. The management will look for employees that fit in, looking for management who fit in. Fit into what? Well, fit into the culture. It's a very nondescript term. They don't actually define what the culture is, but they know it when they know somebody who fits in when they see that person or they talk to that person. Attempts to change this culture will create resistance because of anxiety and confusion that will come from the requirements to change the basic assumptions and values that provide stability and direction in employees' lives. So there we have the kernel of the resistance. Whenever the culture of the organization is threatened, there will be resistance. Now, threatening it could be the introduction of change. Somebody or something proposes change. The market may change. That will cause confusion in the business because it's not internal, so people don't know how to deal with that change. People may think it's not worth carrying on. They want to change job completely because the business is changing beyond all recognition. But maybe if it's internal, the change, they can resist it. And because they've got such a strong culture, such long-term ties to each other and to the premises, and I mean, these people know everything. They know about the machines, the layout, the processing of the materials by the machines. They know the stores and the store manager, and they know about everything about that organization. So when somebody internally proposes a change, almost inevitably it'll be opposed. If it's from the outside, as I said earlier, if the customer is looking for something new which necessitates change, that could lead to confusion, and it could lead to people leaving or taking retirement, or it's not worth it, the thing has changed, the world has changed, we don't like it, we were getting out. So it may lead to considerable upset within the company. And it may be that new people have to be brought in from outside, new recruitment of people with the skills necessary to produce the product that meets the changed consumer requirements. But as I said, if the change is from within, then the culture of the business will kick in and resist the change. So we have an understanding of the resistance to change based, in this case, on the culture of the organization. And that's all we're going to deal with in this topic. As I said, this is one class amongst many, one video amongst many on this topic of resistance to change. So it's wise to look at the other videos as well. But that's all I'm going to deal with here, so thank you for watching.